Big Ten. Yeah, of course, I'm referring to college basketball there, as Michigan and Michigan State both had some difficult games over the weekend. One team coming away from it victorious, the other team coming away from it bullied, bludgeoned, and beaten down. That, of course, being Michigan. We will talk about that. But first, I want to welcome everybody into the show. This may be, and I know I say this every week, man, so who knows? This may be something of a shorter show. We just didn't have a whole lot of content to go off this week. The Lions crapped down their leg last week, so there's not a whole lot to talk about in that department, though I do want to talk about a little bit of football stuff. We will discuss that, and it does pertain to the Lions. And Michigan and Michigan State only played one basketball game this week, so we'll dissect that. Just a few programming notes. If you like what you're seeing here, you can go to castellanicontent.com. That site is getting updated every day with what we do. Look, you can say many things about us. The fact is, we are putting out a pretty significant output of content right now. We got 2 shows a week, and we're trying to do the first watch, and we got movie reviews, and we got the post-game videos. I mean, it's not for lack of trying. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we get closer to the end of this episode. If you listen to us in podcast form, you can find us on Apple Podcasts. You can find us on Spotify. And, of course, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that little bell. That way, every time we upload, you are notified. Okay, well, I did lead off by alluding to what happened in the world of Big Ten basketball last week. I do actually want to start the show with some football talk. And the Lions' body is now cold, I think it's fair to say. Their season ended last Saturday against Washington. As of the time of this recording, the AFC Championship is not decided, but the NFC Championship, which obviously meant a little bit more to the Lions, is decided, and the Eagles just boat raced Washington. And I want to bring this up because it's interesting how this works in sports. Sometimes I will have a team that makes a deep run through the postseason, and they will have their season end, right? And sometimes I look at the game or the team that ended their season, and I say, God damn, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. We were better than that team. We got knocked out by that team. We should have won that game, should have won that series. Prime example, 2013 ALCS. Tigers are better than the Red Sox. They out-hit the Red Sox in that series. They out-pitched the Red Sox in that series, and they lost. Michigan Elite Eight against UCLA in 2021. Michigan shouldn't have lost that game. And they got shut down. They couldn't score in the last few minutes, and they ended up coming up short against Mick Cronin's team. But there are some examples where you look at the team that beat you and you say, you know what, man, you kind of just got to tip your cap. I'll give you a prime example. As much fun as Michigan's championship run was in 2018, when they had Mo Wagner and Abdul Rahman and Beeline leading the way, that Villanova team was crazy good. And Michigan would have had to play their best game in the national championship, and they would have had to have gotten a little bit of luck just to win that game. So when that game ended, I didn't feel like I was gypped out of anything. I didn't feel like my team choked. I felt like my team faced a superior opponent, fought their asses off, and simply got blown out, beaten by a superior opponent. It's not fun. It's not fun to lose, but I can live with that a lot more. There's 2 things I have to say about what I saw on Sunday as the Eagles destroyed the Washington Commanders. Number 1, and this might, I don't know, bring Lions fans a tiny bit of comfort, maybe. Not really. I think the Lions, had they have found a way to get by Washington last week, would have had a hard time getting by Philly. At full strength, I still think the Lions are probably the best team in football. They weren't able to show it in the postseason, obviously, but with the injuries they've had and the weapons that Philadelphia has, I mean, Howie Roseman is as good a GM as there is in sports with the roster that they're able to assemble. I mean, I saw a few Eagles fans that were like, man, 2 years ago we thought it was our shot. Now they're right back in the Super Bowl. Again, they've just been able to reload. You go out and get Saquon, who's guaranteed at least one 60, 70-yard touchdown a game. It's a really remarkable team. I think the Lions would have had a hard time at the current strength that they were at beating Philadelphia at Ford Field. Now, who knows? Maybe they could have pulled it off. You know, I wasn't going to bet the team with the way that they've been playing all season. So that might bring people some closure. What will not bring them closure is the fact that watching the game that Washington played on Sunday against Philadelphia, I was reminded of how piss poor Detroit's game plan was against Washington last weekend. And I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but I'm gonna, because here's what Philadelphia did. Now, don't get me wrong. Jalen Hurts played a wonderful game. He was accurate. He was getting the ball to his receivers. A.J. Brown had a solid ball game. That's all true. On the first play of the game, I believe, the first time Philadelphia had the ball, they ran a pitch play to Saquon Barkley, and he ran for a 60-yard touchdown. By the end of that game, you had, Shipley, this backup running back for them that I've never heard of. He was going nuts. Well over 200 yards on the ground. They dominated the run game against a rush defense that was fucking third to last in the entire league, which is exactly what Detroit refused to do when they played Washington the week before. And you are watching that game. You're watching the NFC Championship saying Philadelphia is winning this football game the exact same way that Detroit should have won that game last Saturday. Now, is Philadelphia's defense right now in a much better position than Washington is? Yes. Detroit was -5 in turnover margin against Washington. You had the Eagles force 4 turnovers against Jane Daniels and Washington on Sunday. So there is, the Washington probably still would have scored their points, but man, sometimes you come away these games the following week with some idea of where that team is at. And sometimes a team is simply better than their record indicates, or maybe Vegas doubted them or the prognosticators doubted them. No, the Lions were, I believe it was an 8.5, 9.5 point favorite against the Commanders for a reason. And they should have won that game, and they should have covered that spread even with the injuries. What they would have done against Philly, that one I could have chalked up more so to the fact that they were just down too many players. Because you need to be at full strength to take on a team that's that good and that talented. That even had you even gotten into a track meet with the kind of offense that the Lions have, I think that it would have been tough to win that game. I'm not going to talk any more about the games themselves. By the time you're listening to this, the Super Bowl will be set. Who knows who's going to be playing in it? We got a pretty good game right here between Buffalo and Kansas City. But there is something I want to talk about, and it is Lions related. Both Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn are no longer with the organization. Ben Johnson took a job to be the head coach of the Chicago Bears. Aaron Glenn took the position to be the head coach of the New York Jets, going back to the team that he used to play for. I mean, the Jets fans love Aaron Glenn. The Glenn situation, I don't have as much to say about it. I thought Glenn was a good defensive coordinator. I have questions about what he'll be as a head coach, and a big reason for that is the team he's coaching. I think the Jets are a complete mess right now. Not to say that the Bears are in some pristine place. I mean, 90% of the time, NFL team hires a new coach. That new coach isn't inheriting a great situation, but I just get the impression that what you need to be as an NFL head coach is a really good motivator and a good micromanager, understanding the ins and outs, the details, crossing your T's, dotting your I's. I felt like as an OC, sans the game against Washington, Ben Johnson did that 95% of the time. I don't know if we got that from Aaron Glenn as a defensive coordinator. And it really is a strange thing because Bears fans are celebrating like crazy right now. And look, Ben Johnson was the hottest commodity on the coaching free agent market, so to speak. That's without a doubt. But it's interesting how this works in the NFL because we have no clue if Ben Johnson knows how to coach a football team. I mean, we know he knows how to call plays. You would, kind of breaking things down and looking at it reasonably, you say, hey, here's a young, potentially explosive quarterback in Caleb Williams. He's got some receivers, but he's never done this before. This is a new role for him. So I wish Aaron Glenn luck. I guess I can't necessarily wish Ben Johnson luck because that would imply that he'd be beating the Lions twice a year. And that's kind of what I want to talk about because there was a lot of vitriol on social media about Ben Johnson taking the Bears job. Now, I'll say this. Had the Lions beaten Washington, even if they would have lost the next week to Philadelphia, that vitriol, I feel like it would have been greatly subsided. I think that the coaching staff's performance against Washington amped up people's frustration and amped up people's criticism. And now you have people running with this whole, it was a distraction. Why were they taking interviews? He had 1 foot out of here he was already going to Chicago. I'll be real. He probably knew he was going to Chicago. That was probably already said. I am not somebody who's going to abide by this idea that it was a distraction. And quite frankly, if it was, and I think I said this on a live stream, let's say that the potential head coaching search for Ben Johnson was a distraction for him the week of the Washington game, then he's not going to be a good NFL head coach. Because if he let that rattle him, you know what you're going to have a ton of as the head of a NFL locker room? A lot of distractions. So I kind of fight back against that narrative. But you had a lot of Lions fans upset because you have a guy who was a huge part of your organization. I mean, really turned Jared Goff around, turned this offense around, along with Brad Holmes. I mean, they got good players. And now he goes to a team that you're going to have to face twice a year, that you're going to be, jockeying for position with in the NFC North. I feel zero ill will towards Ben Johnson, and I think if you do, I just think you're kind of insane. And I had somebody on Twitter say, well, what would you do if Chris Fetter went to Cleveland? Well, okay, first of all, jabroni, it's not the same thing, okay? If Chris Fetter got offered a managerial job in Cleveland, which wouldn't happen because Stephen Vogt was just manager of the year, but hypothetically, let's say that Cleveland was in a pretty good place, and they let Stephen Vogt go, or he retired or went somewhere else, and they brought in Chris Fetter. Would it bother me? It would bother me in the sense I knew that the Tigers would be losing a really good pitching coach, but Ben Johnson, who has not coached a single NFL game ever, is now the second highest paid coach in the league. I don't care if it was the Bears, the Patriots, whoever the Raiders, whoever has a coach opening, that's where he was going. And it seemed like he was excited to go to Chicago. The thing is, I think that Detroit fans, when it comes to their football team, because we've seen it happen in other sports, we haven't dealt with this before, because the truth is, all good teams in the NFL, all good teams in college, you hire good coordinators, those coordinators do a great job for you, they graduate out, and then they go elsewhere. Want to talk about it at the college level? Don Brown was let go. You bring in Mike McDonald. He lasts 1 year, goes to the NFL. He's now a head coach in the NFL. They bring in Jesse Minter. Now Jesse Minter's on Harbaugh's staff, and Jesse Minter will probably be a head coach in the NFL one day. This is how things work. And the idea that this was classless, I don't know, man. Jesus. I mean, how sensitive are we? I mean, I should probably be the last guy in the world to be calling people out for sensitivity as maybe the most sensitive content creator on the internet. But I don't know. I think had he have done this during the season, it's totally different. The season's done. It was finished. He earned the right to pick whatever job he wanted to go to. He wanted to go to Chicago. So my only frustration or ill will that I harbor is just I look forward to hopefully beating them twice a year, and that's totally fair. I love JJ McCarthy, right? I think he's the best quarterback in Michigan football history, and I think he's going to be quite good for the Vikings. But I hope he never beats the Lions. That's totally normal and fair. I just don't really understand the takes from people who are running about this like he betrayed them. I mean, I even posted, and I did it as a joke, the Benedict Arnold meme. But am I actually mad? No, I didn't realize people were actually mad until I went on Twitter and saw the meltdown that people were having. This is something that, as long as the Lions stay consistent, which hopefully they do, they're going to have to deal with. Now, the ball is very much in Dan Campbell's court, because you're not just replacing two coordinators, you're replacing two coordinators that had very high approval ratings. I mean, one, you could argue, completely turned the career of your quarterback around. I mean, there's really no other way to put it. He can't screw this up. You can't have another Anthony Lynn situation. And it's tough. It's even if you're a good coach, you don't always hit home runs with the coordinator hires. But you got to at least hit a double here and maintain some sort of continuity, because it was very clear that this offense, when they were really firing on all cylinders, just totally trusted Ben Johnson and took Ben Johnson's lead. And if we see them take a step backwards, if Jared Goff in the first 4 weeks of next season with a new OC struggles a little bit, there's going to be problems. I mean, this is going to be a huge, huge moment for the Dan Campbell era, because it is something of a transition. It's not to say that you don't return really good players. Of course you do. It's one of the best rosters in football. But you also are replacing a lot of your nucleus in regards to the coaching staff. And Antoine Randall, wide receivers coach, is gone as well. So a lot of change happening in the Lions organization. Hopefully it ends up being good change. Let's talk a little college hoops. I'll start with Michigan, who had, 4 or 5 days off after the overtime game they played against Northwestern, going to Mackey Arena to play against a Purdue team that was out for blood. They had just lost to Ohio State at home. And I figured it would be a kind of a moment for Michigan, whether or loss, where I felt like, look, you've had quite a few days off here. You're going into a hostile environment, far and away the most hostile environment that you've played in so far this season. Now, you did go to the Kohl Center and win. You did go to UCLA and you won. It's not to say that they haven't gone on the road and performed well, but this was a bit different. Going up against the defending champs, several days off, an opportunity to really kind of clean up some mistakes that plagued you over the previous 2 games, and Michigan put together far and away their worst performance of the season. On the first possession of the game, it's very rare that you could say this about basketball. Football, it's a bit different. On the first possession of the game, Trey Donaldson turned the ball over, leading to an uncontested layup for Purdue. They could have sent everybody home after that because Michigan couldn't get out of their own way, and then they ran into a situation which happens in the Big Ten. You go on the road and a team can't miss. I mean, Purdue started throwing in everything from every direction, and they were just feeding off the momentum, feeding off the crowd. It was an ugly loss for Michigan. I'll be real. I think that I've been very fair and very patient with this Michigan team. And don't get me wrong, there's still a lot to like here. This is going to be a tournament team. You get all sorts of reactions on social media. I had people saying Dusty May should be fired, right? Like, it's the way this shit works. It's annoying. This is a tournament team. And I still believe that this team has a ceiling that makes them very dangerous. The last week or the last 3 games or so have been quite a come down. They are a fair amount of luck and 1 ejection away from having lost 3 in a row, which is a death sentence in the Big Ten. Now, they haven't, and they still only lost 2 games in conference. But throughout this season, and we're over halfway through the regular season at this point, I've said, I think this team has a high ceiling, and as long as they get better as the year goes along, I think there's a chance that they could reach that ceiling by February, March, and be one of the more dangerous teams in the tournament. But right now, they're regressing. The turnover problems that were there from day one are still there, and it's just, man, like I said before, I can forgive it sometimes, but when you're going 3 straight possessions and guys are just bouncing balls off their face and, get missed cuts, Danny Wolf cuts and throws it the other way, or Danny Wolf drives and makes a pass to nobody. I mean, it is where, and again, it gives me some hope that maybe they can find it. It is where building a team with so many portal guys can be an issue. Now, Dusty May did it right. He did exactly what you had to do for a first-year coach, but you see in these games sometimes the lack of familiarity these guys have with each other. And Danny Wolf, who I know is a wonderful player, and I've seen play, all-American caliber basketball. I mean, just handing the ball to, he's like Jameis Winston with the turnovers. I mean, it was ridiculous what we were seeing against Purdue. And you got to give Matt Painter credit, because where Michigan had really taken advantage throughout this entire season was the height advantage that they had with the 2 7-footers and the confidence that we'd seen from Vlad Golden over the last month and a half. And man, I swear, he ended up getting, I think, 14 points. Every time Vlad Golden touched the basketball, like 8 guys collapsed on him. Michigan had no answer. Well, I've praised Dusty May. I think there's a lot of positives that he offers as a coach. I would say from a coaching standpoint, that one was kind of a dud too. It just didn't seem like they were prepared. And when you go on the road, especially early in these games, the hype is going to be there. The team you're playing is going to be amped up. You're going to get punched in the mouth a little bit. Michigan did an absolutely terrible job of responding because they didn't respond. I mean, they twiddled their thumbs. And I mean, it's very rare that a team this talented can get blown out like this. And it has kind of changed the way that I'm feeling about this team right now, which is the problems are not only still there, but they've actually increased in terms of their persistentness over the last few games. You gotta really kind of regroup here. That doesn't mean I don't think that they'll make the tournament or anything. In fact, I'm very confident they will. But I have been disappointed because while I will continue to give Dusty May a lot of credit for the roster that he assembled coming into this season. They won 8 games last year. He inherited a mess, and he built a roster that is maybe not against Purdue, but at the very least, they are a very competitive roster. Purdue was their only blowout loss. Every game that they've played, they've either won or it's been a really close loss other than that game. But we're relatively deep into the season now that sheen's kind of wore off. I think I've seen this team play well enough at points to believe that there is something there, and I think they're going to be one of the more frustrating teams that we've watched, because I do believe at points their biggest problem is themselves. Now, the game against Purdue, the way that they were shooting the ball, maybe they would have ended up losing anyway. But they are spotting the other team in the first half of games 15 to 20 points in the turnovers, man. Can't do it. Cannot win with it. So disappointing. Hopefully they can bounce back. But yeah, that one against Purdue was wow. Michigan State. Michigan State went on the road, quote unquote. I guess it was a road game. They played at Madison Square Garden against Rutgers. And this is a little side piece here. I understand that Madison Square Garden is the Mecca. And I also understand geographically how close Madison Square Garden is to Piscataway, New Jersey, as well as the fact that playing a game in Madison Square Garden, it's national TV game. Lots, you're going to get revenue for your program, a lot of eyeballs on the game. I understand it. If I'm Rutgers, I want to play Michigan State at the Rack. I want to, because that place it can get rowdy, it can get loud. I've seen really good teams go there and lose. Now, Michigan State, I think, would have won this game anyway, but I talk about depth with this team, and I'm not the first person to point out. First of all, Michigan State won. They prevailed. They pulled away in the second half. And, well, I don't think Tom Izzo would call it one of their more dominant efforts of the season. I think if you're looking for a game that exemplifies why the depth on this team is so dangerous, I think the Rutgers game is a prime example, because one thing that I've praised this team about many times on this show is their guard play and what they're able to get out of Holloman and Fears and Akins kind of being the closer. And you had all of those guys who were either non-factors offensively, or in the case of Jaden Akins, I mean, he had a terrible, terrible shooting game. And in the first half, arguably your backcourt gave you nothing, man, really, from a scoring standpoint. And what you ended up getting was the bigs coming alive, Cohen Carr with a huge game, Jace Richardson coming off the bench. I mean, I don't know how this stuff works, I mean, in the league anymore, but Jace Richardson, I would imagine he might be on some draft boards. I don't know. I could be way off about that, but I mean, Caleb Houston went pro. I mean, this guy's way better than that. And I think the confidence that Izzo has in him, because you see this with Izzo freshmen sometimes, where he's very patient with them, and he doesn't want to let the dog off the leash. It feels like he has full faith that Jace Richardson can be in control when he has the ball. He's a very good shooter. And you had good games from like Frankie Fiddler played a solid game. Cohen Carr, like I said, was excellent. Booker's getting better. And I think that when we talk about depth, very often what we think of is scoring, and what we think of is points. And, well, obviously, like I said, their guards didn't play a great first half, and the big men kind of kept him in it, as well as Jace Richardson coming off the bench. At the same time, I think that Jay Wright, who's such a good analyst, by the way, pointed something out about what Michigan State's depth can do defensively and what their versatility can do defensively that makes them kind of a nightmare. And he used Frankie Fiddler as an example, because when you watch that Penn State game where he was going nuts, I mean, he was getting rebounds, he was getting offensive rebounds, he was scoring. But as a defender, he's a guy that's capable of playing down low. But Izzo has such faith in the depth of this team, and he has such faith in these players individually, that he can have a guy of Fiddler's size. He's confident having him play guard the guards on the wing. I mean, I think that this is one of the more dynamic Izzo defensive teams that we've seen in a minute, because of the way that they can mix and match. It's unselfish basketball, and they weren't perfect on Saturday. And look, I think the one Achilles heel is the fact that they are not a great shooting team, especially from the outside. Now, I think they have good shooters like Jace or Akins, even Holloman and Fears. Like, I think these guys' jump shots will come along. But if you're trying to just assess what could lead to this team getting upset at some point in March, there are teams in March every year who get crazy hot from the floor, and you got to kind of match it. Does Michigan State, from an outside shooting perspective, have the ability to do that? I don't know. Now, so much of it depends on the draw. And I mean, really, when it comes to NCAA tournament, so much of it, if you have a bad half, like, even if you might not even do anything wrong, you could still find your way out of the tournament. So, yeah, they are, as I said last week, they remain the class of the Big Ten. This is the best team in the Big Ten right now. I think there are other teams that are chasing them, but Michigan State, I think at this point, is about to enter a pretty brutal stretch. I mean, they're going to play a lot of good teams. They don't really have many more easy games. Now, I would argue there's no such thing in the Big Ten as an easy game, but you get my point. At the same time, I don't want to be a broken record about what I said last week, but you got to be thinking at this point, if this does become a team that wins the Big Ten, regardless of what happens in the Big Ten tournament, you got to be considering them, got to consider putting them on the one line with the depth that's in this conference, as well as the always effective, good non-conference schedule that they play. All right. Last thing, I want to talk a little bit of Tigers. And I'm if you're watching on YouTube, I'm rubbing my temples right now because this is kind of a nightmare thing to explain. Okay. So the Alex Bregman saga goes on, right? This soap opera that just seemingly won't end. Who knows? Maybe by the time this video is uploaded, it'll be over. But on Thursday or mid to late week last week, it became clear that the Astros were back in potentially on re-signing Alex Bregman. Now, it had seemingly become a foregone conclusion that Bregman would be signing elsewhere. Tigers dicked around, Red Sox dicked around, I think the Blue Jays have dicked around, and now the Astros like, hey, our offer is still on the table if you want to come back here. Jim Crane, their owner, is not big on going over the luxury tax, right? So you look at where the Astros were at. They traded Kyle Tucker earlier in the offseason, and now you have a few other guys that are under contract. You're not going to trade Altuve. You did acquire Isaac Paredes. You're not going to trade Yordan. And you looked at Ryan Presley, who was the closer during their World Series runs, but was eighth inning, late inning reliever last year, who was entering the last year of his 3-year, $42 million deal. He had a full no trade clause. And so on Friday, it was clear that the Astros were attempting to make a trade to send Ryan Presley either to play for the Tigers or to Chicago to play for the Cubs. And very quickly it came back and said, no, he's not going to Detroit. He's not going to be playing for the Tigers. So that saga lasted like an hour and was a total waste of time. On Sunday, he announced that he had waived his no trade and was now going to be closing games for the Chicago Cubs on the north side of Chicago. Why does this matter? As I throw up the Brian Windhorst meme fingers. This matters because the percentage chance of this whole big fat ordeal ending with Alex Bregman right back where he began and has played his entire career is looking more likely. I don't think this will happen, but I don't see Scott Harris budging. I don't see Chris Ilitch budging at this point. I've heard rumors about what the Astros offer is. I think ultimately what's happened, and we've seen this happen with Boris clients, is the fact that Scott Boras is the best agent in sports if you are at the top of your game. If not, you're probably a nightmare to negotiate with. Like Juan Soto got $800 million. Juan Soto is one of the 3 best players. He's probably the best hitter in the world, right? And he's 26. Right? The fact is, Bregman, wonderful player. I want him. I'd take him on the Tigers. There's going to be teams that are going to be hesitant, probably Detroit being one of those teams, because he's not 2019 Bregman anymore. He's not 2018 Bregman, and I think that there's some concerns of regression. And what you end up with, Pete Alonso's going through the same situation, is a lot of teams that are kind of dipping their toes in the pond but are afraid to jump in head first. And it could just end up with Bregman back in Houston. I don't even want to think about this because it's going to give me another headache. I have no clue where the Tigers will be at, where their heads will be at if Bregman does not end up in Detroit. It's a tough sell. It is a tough sell if you come away from your most successful season in a decade with Gleyber Torres, Alex Cobb, and a reliever. Now, you better pray to God that every one of these guys, like every one of them, Jace Young, Malloy, Parker, Colt Keith, that all these guys hit. Because if not, we're going to be looking at another team that's losing a whole lot of 2-1 ball games, right? Yeah, and honestly, at that point, and this is what concerns me, at that point, Torkelson becomes more important. Because if you want to have a stable offense, like he's going to have to come along, and he's 3 years into his fucking career. This is so, and we talked about it with Dan Hasty. This is so frustrating because I still absolutely, more than I ever have, believe in the term sustainability of this organization. I also believe you can sign one fucking player. Shit on a stick. All right. We'll see how this saga ends. That will do it for today's. I'll say this. There will be no Chris and Company this week unless it's late in the week. I have a family matter that my family and I are attending to. I will be out of state the beginning of this week. I think that will allow us some time to upload some other stuff. I know that we have a first watch episode that I want to upload. I think we're still working on the Lions Commanders vlog. We probably would have had that out earlier, but season's over, so it's like, it's not like we have another game to look forward to. We're going to continue pumping stuff out. Go to castellanicontent.com to get updated on all that stuff. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. We've been very consistent with the Chris and Company stuff and getting the interviews. I want to just put this question out there, to be honest with you. And I guess I probably could have done this on Twitter as well, but we're already recording, so, whatever. I am consistently very pleased with the product that Austin and I put out. We whole ass everything. We don't half ass anything. I like the interviews. I like I'll say this. I like the vlogs we do. But from a YouTube standpoint, TikTok and Twitter, it's different. Just solely in regards to our YouTube numbers, they're not good. They should be and could be a lot better. And I'm looking at where we're at and thinking to myself, well, the content is good, so we got to do something else. And the fact is, I'm getting the impression, just based on YouTube, that, like I said, we're growing on TikTok. I mean, we're like every day, we're picking up like several dozen followers at this point. We've really popped off there. That's great. And a lot of that is posting the clips from these shows. But, I mean, I just got to be honest. If I want to be a name in media, we can't be doing 100 views a pop, And so this is just me putting the question out there for you guys, saying, what more from this account, specifically the YouTube channel, do you want to see from us? Maybe the answer is nothing. If that's the case, that's not, you're not helping me. I'll probably just continue doing what we're doing. But I can be as proud as I want to be. We are only as good as the audience that pays attention to us. So I think that we've done a very good job in the last few of diversifying what we do. With the movie stuff and with I'll say this and the interviews and obviously the stuff that we have going on the website. But the next step, as it pertains to YouTube, is increasing the numbers. And I got to continue to do a better job of making sure that we're improving our SEO score, that we're hitting all the beats that we need to hit, that we're promoting stuff properly. But I also am more than willing to listen to my audience and figure out what they want from us here. So, yeah, that's kind of a long-winded thing. But that will do it for today's show. Follow me on Twitter at Castellani 2014. Thank you guys very much for all the continual support. Be back next week, and we'll have stuff coming out. Don't worry about it. We're don't be going nowhere. I appreciate y'all. Have a great rest of your day. Peace and happiness.